All right, I call town meeting to order. We are here on June 22nd, 2020 for the special town meeting and for the annual town meeting for the town of Norwood. If everyone would please rise, Ted Mulvihill, our Veterans Agent, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ted.
Ladies and gentlemen, your hand to your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. I just want to ask everybody if they would pause for a moment of prayer or reflection. We always ask that the town meeting members remember those of our town meeting who have passed away since we were last together. And I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, but I did want to especially mention Ed and Marjorie McKenna, both of whom served the town and the greater community for many years in many different roles. Ed was a member of the Permanent Building Construction Committee, and Marjorie, years ago, was a member of the school committee and was also had a brief career as a model for trash cans when John Carroll first introduced us to the rolling trash cans. She was the demonstrator. So they have passed away in the last couple of months. Let us also remember those in our community and our families who have lost loved ones during the pandemic for whatever cause, because it's, I think, more difficult for people to lose loved ones in these days when we can't grieve in the normal way. And let's also keep in mind those who work to help the sick, to keep us safe, to keep our community running with new and innovative ways of helping those in need when help has been required. And finally, in this time of turmoil in our nation, let us focus our energies and talents on how we as individuals and as a community can help to bring comfort and justice and assistance to those who are in need of those things. So if we can all, for a moment, just have a moment of silence with those thoughts. Thank you very much. Please be seated. A lot of work has gone into getting us here, and I want to thank everybody who was part of the planning. In particular, I want to thank our town clerk, Mary Lou Folan, and her staff, our health director, Sigal Reese, and her staff, and Paul Riccardi, director of buildings and grounds for the school department, and his staff. Those are the people that I have come to rely upon the most. There were others too, and they were very helpful, but in terms of how to set this up, how to do this, and hopefully we will have a successful town meeting and as safe a town meeting as we can have. If there are any new members or recently re-elected members who haven't been sworn in, I'm going to ask Mary Lou Folan to do that now. By the way, normally you're expected to go and get your picture taken for a badge. At the Civic Center, please don't do that until the town clerk's office lets you know that it's okay to do that. Civic Center's been closed, and so the need for badges is temporarily suspended. At some point, we will have the badges, the pictures being taken again, but the clerk's office will let you know when that's okay. So, Mary Lou, if you could swear in. Are there any members who've not been sworn in? Imagine there are a few. If those members would rise, either newly elected or recently re-elected. Is that, you want to use that mic?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, will you raise your right hands, please? Do you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties incumbent on you as town meeting members to the best of your ability, according to the bylaws of the town and the statutes of the Commonwealth? Okay?
Thank you, Mrs. Folan. Thank you all. And a couple of reminders. We have several ushers. You probably met them on the way in. And we have some runners with microphones. The microphones are on poles or booms. And the microphone runners will be holding on to those. Please don't touch the microphones if you're called on to speak. They'll hold it for you so that we can all hear. I know we're used to holding on to the microphone ourselves, but we're going to skip that this time around. And I want to mention that I heard from Congressman Lynch's office, and he is hoping to stop in at the meeting tonight. Representative Rogers is here. Because of the conditions under which we're meeting and the need to move things along, neither one will be speaking to us, but we do appreciate their interest. Congressman Lynch, I think, is going to 3 town meetings tonight. You only have to go to 1. And he has some other event also. So he will be dropping by at some point, and we appreciate their interest in our affairs. Now, we have 2 town meetings. The special was scheduled for 6 o'clock, the annual for 6:05. So I now call the special town meeting to order, and I will accept a motion to adjourn that so that we can open the annual, which we will then adjourn to the close of the special. Mr. McFarland, that's your motion to adjourn the special. All right, is there a second to that? Mr. Esco. All right, on the motion to adjourn the special for a couple of minutes so that we can open and then adjourn the annual, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. We now open the annual town meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn that until the close of the special. Mrs. Slater, and by Mrs. Slater, and seconded by Mr. McFarland. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. We are adjourned as far as the special goes, and we return, as far as the annual goes, we now return to the special. By the way, this may be the only time when we can walk into a bank wearing a mask and not get arrested. That is, if you can find a bank that's open. But I apologize if I misrecognize some of you this evening. It's a little bit tough when most of your faces are covered. By the way, I'm reminded that the health department has reminded me that we appreciate everybody wearing masks, and hopefully you're wearing your mask above and over your nose. A mask not over the nose is really not a mask worn. So please try to keep that in mind. I'm going to keep this on as long as I can, even though there's nobody close to me, and this is my microphone, nobody else is using it. But we'll go now into the special. And we have 3 articles in the special. And we'll begin with Article 1. And all of the motions in the special are coming from the Finance Commission. So, Mrs. Haley, with respect to Article 1, you have a motion.
Thank you. Do I need to read the article or
No,
just the motion?
Just
Okay.
the motion.
Recommended by the Finance Commission that the following amounts totaling $395,000 be appropriated for the purposes indicated from the sources indicated on the attached schedule. In your packet, you should have received a schedule.
There should be a schedule of several accounts, and the expenditures are total of $395,000. Mrs. Haley, these are coming from being transferred, is that right?
There are several accounts. Do you want me to read them?
Why don't you, don't read the account numbers, why don't you just read the items that we're spending money on?
Okay. First item, finance and accounting salaries, $18,000, and it comes from the audit services. Second one, info tech salaries, $2,000 from HR salaries. Third, building commissioner salary, $28,000 from HR salaries. COA, Council on Aging, salaries, part-time person, $4,000, HR salaries. The rest are all from snow and ice. Public Works salaries for $26,000, Town Council for $58,000, the Police and Fire Department Dispatch Center, $10,000, fire salaries, $35,000, Public Safety Building Utilities, $20,000, extended day cost, $164,000, school food service account, $30,000.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On the motion, $395,000 to be transferred from various accounts as set forth by Mrs. Haley and transferred to several other accounts also as set forth by Mrs. Haley. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Okay, Article 2, Mrs. Haley.
That the sum of $304,000 be transferred from free cash and appropriated for the capital projects indicated. For the school's audio-visual boards, I guess they're called, $164,000, and for the school, 4 special needs vans for $140,000.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On the motion, a total of $304,000. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. The third article, Mrs. Haley.
Recommended by the Finance Commission that the sum of $629,600 be appropriated for the cost of rehabilitation and replacement of water mains and for the other water system improvements, including the payment of costs incidental or related thereto, in accordance with the rules and regulations of the MWRA Local Water System Assistance Program. And that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow the sum of $629,600 at no interest from the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, in accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 44 or any other enabling authority. And further, that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to expend said sum for said purposes and to take any other action necessary to carry out these projects.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Haley. So this involves a appropriation of $629,000, and those funds that be borrowed from the MWRA. Any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote then. This requires a 2/3 vote because it involves borrowing. So I'll start with a voice vote. And Mrs. Carney, I'll ask you to check with the people outside also. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. All right, Mrs. Carney? Unanimous out there, unanimous in here. Madam Clerk, if you would note that that passed unanimously. All right, Mrs. Haley, that was the last of the articles under the special town meeting. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to dissolve the special town meeting. Mr. McFarland, seconded by Mrs. Slater. On dissolution of the special, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Okay, we move now into the annual that we had adjourned for a few moments. And we have motions by the selectmen as to some matters and motions by the FinCom as to others. Article 1, motion by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Plasko?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Move that the annual report of the town officials of the town of Norwood be received and accepted as printed.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Okay. I think we are not expecting any reports from any other town offices or committees. Most of that will be put off to a town meeting that we expect to have in the fall. But in the interest of time, we're not going to poll the group for committee reports or anything like that. All right, we move on to Article 2. And I have a motion by somebody. Mr. Plasko, is that coming from the selectmen?
If it's a scribble, it's mine, Mr. Moderator. Yes, sir.
All right.
that the town hereby votes to allow the treasurer from time to time to enter into compensating balance agreements with banks in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53F, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. All right, and this is on petition of the town treasurer and tax collector. This is one of our housekeeping matters that we do every year to authorize compensating balance agreements with the banks. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On the motion as read by Mr. Plasko, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Article 3, Mr. Plasko.
I think this is a Finance Commission motion.
I have the draft with you on it, but this involves, no, it's authorizing limits. It's not actually spending the money, it's
Okay.
authorizing the limits.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Then I move that the town hereby votes to authorize the following revolving fund spending limits for fiscal year 2021 in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53E1/2, for the purpose of funding programs administered by the Council on Aging, spending limit $125,000, and the Norwood Public Library spending limit $50,000.
All right. On the motion, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Plasko. Of course, the moving party can always speak to the motion, but nobody's objected yet. Any discussion? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On the motion, as read by Mr. Plasko, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. All right, we now move into the, starting with Article 4, we're doing the budget. And we have, I think, 10 motions under Article 4. The budget has been broken down into discrete sections for the purposes of the motions, and the motions will come from the Finance Commission. I think these were in the budget book. Mr. McQuaid, is that right? Yes. These motions were in the budget book. There may be some last-minute tweaks on some of the numbers, but hopefully folks took a look at them in advance. And Ms. Haley, when you read these, since we have published the motions, are there any changes in the numbers from what was published in the book? Mr. McQuaid says no. So the members already have the motions. We can dispense, unless there's an objection, we can dispense with the reading of the account numbers and the individual dollar amounts. Ms. Haley, I think it's sufficient to read the total, which would be under general government total, when you read the motion. And then if anybody has questions on any part of the motion, of course, we'll allow discussion on that. But in the interest of time, we don't need to read every account. Ms. Haley, motion number 1.
Before I start with the motion, if you have your book, it's, I think you'll find what you need under 3B1.
Thank you.
And then you'll be able to follow along within those groupings. Okay? Mr. Moderator, may I say a word before we begin? May I say a word before we begin? May I say a word before we begin?
Yes.
Okay.
Brief word, sure.
Just to let you know that I think it's wonderful that everybody came, and I'm just thrilled to see so many familiar faces out there, or masks, faces behind the mask. I wanted to let you know that this budget was kind of difficult to do, and there was lots of back and forth. In fact, the Finance Commission actually voted on the original budget and then made some changes, which we will, which we will identify for you as we go along. But I just wanted to thank you all for coming. Okay, so let's see. Motion number 1, Article 4, motion number 1, recommended by the Finance Commission. Voted that the sum of $125,000 be transferred from cemetery receipts for the sale of lots and graves, Fund 4901, and that the sum of $5,805,000 $4,610 be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission, unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries total, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. As collective bargaining agreements are settled, management will have the right to transfer budgets from Department 198 GG COLA to be allocated to each appropriate department. Thank you, Mr.
All right. So the motion is for general government, and the total is $5,930,610. Any discussion? And you may discuss any particular matter on it. Yes, Ms. Esco, oh, that's right, you had registered on this one. Thank you. This is the one. The print's getting so small, I'm having trouble following it. You wanted to speak on this. And I have a couple of other speakers on this.
Thank you. Tony Esco, District 5. As a special town meeting nearly 25 years ago, I'm talking about the community planning development budget. At a special town meeting nearly 25 years ago, members here voted for and directed the town to fund the position of a conservation agent. I publicly advocated for the creation of that position because at that time, Mwra didn't have one. And when a developer was violating his orders of condition with a bulldozer in my neighborhood, I called Town Hall. But there was no paid staff member during working hours whose responsibility was to execute a timely cease and desist order. Thankfully, we have had a great agent for nearly 25 years in Al Getz. He deserves our recognition and thanks. The agent works with the Conservation Commission to ensure that the Wetlands Protection Act and other laws are responsibly adhered to. However, recently, starting last year, the town organizational chart has been changed, and the conservation agent is now under the Community Development Department instead of being separate under the Conservation Commission, and their conservation budget is no longer visible to town meeting members as it is embedded in the Community Development budget. The chart states that the Conservation Commission is considered advisory, but they are more than that. They are legally bound to implement the laws of the Wetlands Protection Act and numerous related regulations. I would like, please, Mr. Moderator, to direct a question to the Board of Selectmen and ask, why did you approve changing the town's organizational chart such that the conservation agent now reports to the Community Planning Department rather than keeping the integrity of the position as it was before, solely tied to the Conservation Commission? Can you tell me how that benefits Norwood's wetlands and implementation of regulations? That's my first question.
All right,
Please.
that was to the Board of Selectmen, and Mr. Plasko, you're going to take that?
Well, I'll start and ask the manager to fill in the blanks. The general manager under our charter has the authority to organize and continue or discontinue divisions and reestablish positions from time to time in accordance with what he feels is in the best, determines is in the best interest of the town. And this is a recommended organizational change from the manager, and I'll ask him to fill in any other details.
Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. To Mr. Plasko's point, on the organizational chart, the Conservation Commission has never been the appointing authority for that staff, so that's why it lists them on an organizational chart as advisory. They're not the appointing authority for that staff. The Board of Health is the appointing authority for their staff. The Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority for the manager and a few other positions. So the agent position is a part-time position. The individual in that position is retiring. It provided service from, and Al did a great job, from 8 to noon, Monday through Friday. We didn't have afternoon service. The position's being expanded to a full-time agent/planner position so that we can get more out of the next occupant of that office. We'll have full-time conservation support. We'll have the full-time ability to order any conditions that need to be done or take care of the agent's work, but we also want to do some of the planning work so we can be proactive in our environmental approach and not reactive. Currently, the position as it is only responds to complaints and reviews applications. We want to be proactive in planning, in grant writing, and going out there and looking at what we can do to increase the overall environmental quality in the community. The Conservation Commission, as you stated, has statutory authority to enforce the state's Wetlands Protection Act and our local Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Nothing changes about that. This is simply the staff support provided to a number of boards and committees, and we're trying to make that staff support on a day-to-day level be more efficient. In terms of assigning the agent to the planning director as his day-to-day supervisor, they all fall under a single list of community development functions, and we've made those changes in several departments recently over the last couple of years to ensure that there actually is a day-to-day supervisor of staff, to make sure that there's somebody from an audit standpoint who signs off on payroll, who approves vacations, who approves sick times. We haven't had that in a lot of these departments of one. Now we have that. So this is simply a change of the job description. It's going to full-time. There's always been a part-time benefited position in there. It'll simply be a full-time benefited position beginning in July 1st.
Follow up?
Please, it's not too long. Norwood is a highly built-out and developed town, and new development and growth is always desired for its positive economic impact, but we also need to be careful about encroachment to wetlands or other sensitive areas in our zealous pursuit of that growth and development. There is a new position in the community development budget called environmental planner / conservation agent, who will wear two hats, one reporting to the director of community planning and the other to the Conservation Commission. It is my understanding that the Human Resources Department conducted a survey of over 20 towns and that Norwood was at the bottom in terms of conservation staffing. The data shows we could probably use a full-time conservation agent with all that is going on in town. And the planning department recently acquired a full-time assistant planner. My question, suppose a developer violates his orders of conditions on a large project. Can you tell me how a shared position called environmental planner conservation agent person is better for the town? Because on the one hand, the planning side of this employee doesn't want to stop a project, but the conservation agent side of the same job says you must cease and desist. Why would Norwood want to create this split situation to begin with? I know the town manager and the town planner kindly tried to enlighten me on this, but I really felt that this information should come to the town meeting so that you could fully understand how Norwood is being governed in this area. I just couldn't seem to grasp why we are establishing this divisive position. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esco. I next have Mrs. Donahue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Helen Donahue, District 6. It's hard for me to talk with the mask on. I hope that Mr. Hajar is 6 feet away. I've always been a big fan of the planning board, and I remember when we hired the first town planner. At that time, then we had a secretary to help the town planner, and then that position became expanded. It's more of an aide now to the town planner. But in real life, how can you wear two hats? You have to have a loyalty. These are two totally different subjects, and it may be easier to put it in the budget to get a third person for the planning department or a second person, full-time person for the Conservation Commission. But in real life, the questions that Mrs. Esco brought up clearly show that it can't be done. And I think that we have this wonderful Conservation Commission. Now we have the Community Preservation Committee, and we're going to be able to concentrate more on our conservation around town. And I think that we can't let this conservation go. I think that we have to separate them and keep them equal so each department will have enough power.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. I have next registered, it wasn't a question, I'll come back to Mr. Mizuko in a moment. Ms. Doyle. There you are.
Cheryl Doyle, District 7. I think we should have them separated again. It is a conflict of interest. It will be a lawsuit waiting to happen for us on several levels. The commission is an enforcement body for the wetlands protection and everything else, but also the job description isn't a proper job description of what the conservation agent had really been doing, because he does a lot that's behind the scenes that people don't realize. You don't have an agent delineate the wetlands. It takes 2 to 3 hours minimum to delineate a wetland. If we start delineating it, then that means the taxpayers are paying for a delineation, and this costs a few $1,000s. The applicant has always been responsible for delineating, and the agent goes out and they'll check. If there's a discrepancy and the discrepancy is large enough, then the commission will ask for a peer review. Once again, the applicant pays, not the taxpayers. I know Mr. Mizuko said that our agent was benefited. He wasn't. He wasn't a benefited position. Ramonda's not a benefited position. So our admin and our agent, neither one was benefited. So at $60-some thousand, whatever that you hire, you have to add all the benefits. Ramonda is benefited through the zoning. All of Al's health care is done because he's on Social Security because of his age. There's a lot of issues with this. We should be standalone. We haven't known what our monies are. We don't know what our budget is. There's been times that I've asked for an enforcement order when Al's been out, and the enforcement order hasn't been done, and it should have been done. So the person that I needed it on, they went ahead, finished the project. There was no filing, so you lose not only the protection of the wetlands, you lost the filing fees, and you also lost any money going to CPC. I can go on and on and on why all this is a conflict. We're not about building, we're about protecting. And in this town, the one thing people always say to us is we have a problem with water coming on our lots. We take that very serious and we look at it, and that is our goal. We don't care about the lot lines. We don't care about who owns what. What we care about is all that water. And with the water bodies, people go, okay, you only are looking at water. We're not just looking at the water. There's this whole huge ecosystem that comes into play, and all that factors into development. Al had always watched these projects from beginning to end, and we need somebody that can be there to go from beginning to end, and that's what we need. And I urge this body, please vote to separate us back. Please vote that we have a conservation commission and agent and not a planner. We don't do planning. It's not in our, that's why we have a planning board. That's their job. Thank you.
Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just to respond to a few of the items here, I want to address the idea that there's divided loyalties. So remember that there's boards that have statutory authority, and then there's the staff. And to say that somebody, because they're engaged in environmental planning, which oftentimes is grant writing and open space acquisition, somehow can't also engage in planning for a good project is just wrong. The employee has to follow the rules, and our staff follow the rules and the law. The same idea applies to the building inspector's office. They want to see growth. That's how they're paid, by generating building permit revenues. They have to follow the rules. Staff who are assigned regulatory orders and regulatory jurisdictions have to follow the rules. Our police officers do. Everyone else does. The police officers have to respond to the police chief, but they work for a manager who works for a board. There's no divided loyalties there. An employee assigned with enforcing Wetlands Protections Act or wetland orders is of course going to do that. To assume otherwise would question our whole system and whether or not staff can do their jobs, and I feel that they can do their jobs very well, and they continue to. Good planning includes environmental planning and looking forward. I'll give you an example of the Saint Street lot. How many years did it take us with that lot being on an open space plan to acquire a piece of land that we acquired for less than $300,000? That's less than what we spend on dental insurance for retirees in 1 year. And it took us decades to get there because we're not putting enough resources towards being proactive. We can do what we've done for 20 years, and it's done well. But what towns did when we first started having wetlands protection bylaws is we sat there and we had an agent. We said, as applications come before us, we're going to review them. If we get a violation, we're going to review them. But we're not being proactive in actually trying to plan out the future of the environment, both the built and the non-built environment in this community. So they're in no ways an antithesis to each other. In terms of benefits eligible, we speak that any position by law in Massachusetts at 20 hours a week is benefits eligible. Whether or not an employee chooses to take benefits is a private matter, and it's confidential to that employee if they have them through somewhere else. But any position in a municipality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts by law is eligible for benefits after 20 hours a week of regular work. And in terms of the job description, we intentionally craft job descriptions based on peer job descriptions, and there's about 20 other communities that use an almost identical description and position where they either have just a planner and an agent, and that's their one staff position, or they've moved towards the environmental planner concept as a way of, yes, this is the regulatory agent, but what are we doing to go forward to improve the environmental conditions in the community? Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Mizuko. Anything further on the matter from somebody who hasn't spoken yet? Mr. Easy?
Paul Easy, District 3. I think we have a very good town planner in the town of Norwood. I would like to know what his opinion is, since he's the head of that department.
Mr. Halkiotis? You come down and we'll get the microphone to you. Or actually come halfway down and they can probably reach you. Wait a minute, Paul.
Are we on?
All right, try now. Not on yet. Is there a switch on that needs to be? If not, we'll try the other for a moment. And maybe we can bring that one back to the board. All right, Mr. Halkiotis.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. My name is Paul Halkiotis. I'm the Planning and Economic Development Director. I want to thank Mr. Easy for his kind words and respectfully disagree with Mrs. Donahue and Mrs. Doyle. I am living proof that you can be an environmental planner and be an economic development planner. That's what I do here for the town every day. I have had some great success working with the Planning Board and the Economic Development Committee, the Board of Selectmen, in bringing great companies to the town of Norwood, and one of them is hopefully working on a vaccine for the pandemic, Moderna. I've also been successful in my environmental planning efforts. After prior attempts to get the town to adopt the Community Preservation Act, working with Debbie Homewood and the Planning Board, we were successful in overwhelmingly getting public support and approval for the Community Preservation Act at town meeting and at the ballot box. I work every day wearing several hats: transportation planning, housing planning, economic development planning, land use planning, regulatory planning. That's the kind of job that a town planner has to be multi-talented and to be able to be not necessarily an expert in transportation planning, but being able to understand the traffic study and what the results of it are. The town of Norwood has been understaffed with respect to conservation issues for many years. 25 years ago, when Mr. Getz started that position, I shared an office in a town of a population of 6,000, and we created a conservation agent position in that community 25 years ago. Norwood has had a part-time position for the last 25 years, and it's time for a change. I knew that the town was understaffed when it came to staffing the Conservation Commission, and that was confirmed by a study that the Human Resources Department conducted earlier this year. They contacted 24 other communities that Norwood typically compares itself to, and the results of the study that they conducted were no surprise to me. Norwood came in last. We had the fewest amount of hours dedicated to conservation work. We spent the least amount of money. And out of those 24 communities, 15 of them had a full-time conservation agent, and some also had full-time administrative staff. this proved that what I already knew, it confirmed that we were behind the curve and that we needed to increase the amount of staff for this position. That's not necessarily the issue that I hear tonight. It's a broader policy issue of who should the conservation agent report to. Should they report to the Conservation Commission, the general manager, or report to the director of community planning and economic development? I take offense to people characterizing how I would act in a certain situation. What I heard was if there was a violation a violation of orders or conditions that were issued by the Conservation Commission, because I also have expertise in economic development, that somehow I'd want to look the other way and get in the way. That is absolutely the farthest from the truth, and I take offense that people are trying to tell me how I would act in a certain situation. We work hard to uphold all of the regulations of the state and the community, and it doesn't matter whether they're environmental regulations for the Conservation Commission or zoning regulations. They're all treated the same way. I think that it's important for us to look ahead. We need to increase the staffing in this area, and as the situation currently stands right now, the part-time administrator to the Conservation Commission has given her notice. The part-time agent has submitted a letter announcing his retirement, and as of the end of this month, there will be vacancies. We provided funding in the position, in the budget, to have the existing agent overlap and train this new person. We've also provided funding in the budget to have the administrative position train on the administrative aspects of the position. So we are positioned to go forward and have some overlap between the two jobs and have a seamless new hire to come in and be trained for this position. So I want to just kind of wrap up by saying that I think that we have a good plan moving forward, and I will do a good job of supervising that position and being more proactive in the environmental planning work that needs to be done for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halkiotis. All right, before I call on people who've spoken, I want to see if there's anybody who hasn't spoken yet who wants to speak to the matter. Mr. DiMaria.
Good evening. I'm Joe DiMaria. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and have been a member of the Conservation Commission for 40 years. I am very disappointed in the fact that the conservation agent will no longer report to the Conservation Commission. Whenever you have a person in a job and he has divided loyalties, that is, he works in two different departments, and one of the departments is the department that is responsible for his wages, and the other department is responsible for his assignments for half of his work time, you can generally assume that his loyalties are divided, and certainly not in the area where he's not being rewarded by the group that he's working for. I am thoroughly concerned that unless the Conservation Commission has an agent that can work independently from any other group in town, that it will not be effective. There have been a couple of incidences, and one of the most recent was the Amazon building that was being built.
Mr. Deere, would you prefer to sit down while you speak? I realize you've got your foot in a walking cast. If it's better, you may sit down. Thank you.
Thank you. The Amazon building was built many years ago and somehow was not recognized as an area that should have come to the Conservation Commission. And the building was put up even though there was a brook on the property. That building has come back, but not in the normal way, not as a notice of intent or a request for building to the Conservation Commission, but by a different manner, and it was not publicly advertised. The abutters of the building had no previous warning that this was going to happen, and in fact, there is a brook within the area that is normally looked at by the Conservation Commission. Frequently, if the brook is far enough away, there's a little bit of leeway, and the Conservation Commission puts into the deed a restriction that says you may not do things that will bother the brook. It's been that way for the last 40 years. Because this thing came to us, to the Conservation Commission, through a different department, that was not made, and that does not happen. So the environmental salvage of that brook has been compromised. You cannot have a man working for two masters. He's either going to not do a good job in one, or he'll be very frustrated doing his work. I really feel that the conservation agent should report directly to the Conservation Department. Conservation Department has been before this board, this town meeting, 3 times in its careers, and you have approved all of our restrictions. Every one of our restrictions, because they're more stringent than the state restrictions, have come from this body. We are proud that this body is effective in saving their areas of concern. And I hope that somehow we can reverse this sharing of the new conservation agent with 2 masters. You know from yourself, if you had to work for 2 different groups, and one of them was the one that controlled your salary, you would have a very difficult time doing your job the way it should be done. Please turn this down. Let's see what we can do about getting an agent, either full-time or preferably full-time or part-time, but with only 1 master, because conservation and planning are 2 separate entities. Thank you very much.
Yes, the lady in the blue shirt. Over here, please.
Amanda Rafi, Town Meeting, District 9. I have a question.
I'm sorry, what district?
District 9.
Thank you.
I'm so confused. Is there an actual motion before the board, and can this body even make a change to an organizational chart by the town manager? Like, I'm just so confused.
I don't think that, and I'll ask council, if the town manager is, by the way, Karis North is with us as our counsel this evening for Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane. If the town manager is authorized to set the organizational chart of the different departments of the town, is this body authorized to vary that, or is that a matter of the charter?
That's a matter of the charter, and that's within the powers of the general manager.
All right, so the issue of who works for whom is within the powers of the general manager. What's before us is a motion to approve $5.9 million for a whole bunch of departments, including community development, which is, in the parenthetical is planning, zoning, and Concom. So that's what's before us. Okay?
Mr. Moderator, would it be okay if I called a question?
Please.
I make a motion to call to question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, I'm having trouble hearing. I thought you said, can you ask a question? No, you cannot move the question because you spoke. All right? But thank you for your comments on that. Mr. McFarland. Next time we do this, we're getting roller skates with rubber wheels. It'll be easier for them.
Peter McFarland, District 3, move the question.
All right, Mr. McFarland moves the question, and Ms. Hubbard seconds it. On moving the question, this requires a 2/3 vote, but I'll start on a voice vote. And Ms. Carney, if you can check with the folks outside. On moving the question, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. All right, the question has been moved, and we now move to a vote on the motion as presented by the Finance Commission, a total of $5,930,610 for the various departments I previously identified in the written motion that you have. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And all those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Okay, we move on now to the second motion under Article 4. Mrs. Haley. Wait a minute.
Motion number 2, page 3B1. Okay, recommended by the Finance Commission that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries totals, operating expenses totals, and expense totals, capital expense totals, are explicitly incorporated into this vote. $17,527,184.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. This is for public safety, including police, fire, building commissioner, public safety, building maintenance, emergency management, and traffic control fire alarms. So the motion is for $17,527,184. Any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, then, we'll put it to a vote. The motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried unanimously. The third motion under Article 4, Mrs. Haley.
Motion 3, recommended by the Finance Commission. It's on 3B2. Recommended by the Finance Commission. The following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries totals, operating expense totals, and capital expense totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. $400,000 of the highway maintenance appropriation may not be encumbered or expensed prior to December 1, 2020. On this, please.
Ms. Haley?
The last sentence of this, the $400,000 of the highway maintenance appropriation, that is extra money that we were going to appropriate for highway maintenance, road repair, and that sort of thing. The Finance Commission, I think you've all heard several times now, we do repeat ourselves, that we were concerned about the budget and about our revenues, so we decided that we needed to cut some things back temporarily, and this is one of them, the $400,000. So we want to put that on hold, pause, as Mr. Mizuko calls it, and wait until a fall town meeting, and then if we find that we have enough revenues, we will expend that money.
Thank you. Ms. Haley, before we go forward on this, I have a question for council. The motion says may not be encumbered or expensed. Should it say shall not be encumbered or expensed prior to December 1st, 2020? The shall being mandatory.
The shall being mandatory,
Yeah.
I agree
Yes. And the word expended, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Haley, I'm just wondering, is it the intention in making this motion that that $400,000 cannot be spent?
Correct.
Prior to, okay, so
Correct.
would the Finance Commission agree that it should read, shall not be encumbered or expended?
That was our intention, yes.
Is that agreeable to the Finance Commission, since it's your motion?
Yes.
And the seconder of the motion, whoever that is?
Judy?
Ms. Langone, all right. So if this is a clarification of the language where it said may, we are substituting shall, the moving party is substituting shall, and where it said expensed, it was intended to say expended. All right, any discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote on the motion as read and as corrected or modified. All those, the total is, and this is for Public Works, by the way, folks. So Public Works, engineering, highway maintenance, snow and ice removal, street lighting, waste collection and disposal, airport, cemetery, and parks maintenance. The total is $8,219,710. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. The next motion, number 4, Mrs. Haley.
Before I begin with number 4, there were a couple more in here that were like that I thought had been corrected before we received these printed ones.
We'll be on the lookout for those.
So we'll be on the lookout. Thank you. Motion number 4, again on 3B2. Recommended by the Finance Commission that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As salaries in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries total, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated in this vote. This vote is on Health and Human Services, Board of Health, Council on Aging, and the Veterans Services.
And the total?
Pardon me?
The total.
Total, I'm sorry.
Use the microphone.
$1,581,775.
All right. Any discussion on this under Health and Human Services? In the back? In the blue shirt? I need binoculars in this room.
Brian Clark, District 2. I was curious on the breakout of the budget in that area, what percentage goes to people with mental health challenges, intellectual developmental disabilities? Like, what's the breakout? I see the numbers for Council of Aging, but was wondering how the budget broke out to include those living in our community with those challenges.
Let's see if who might be answering that. Mr. Mizuko, this covers actually 3 different departments. So you want to take first crack at it? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll start and then I'll defer to the Director of the Board of Health. The answer in terms of what portion of that budget, it's actually relatively low for a couple of reasons. Most of those services are provided by the state. We don't provide direct mental health services to residents. Separately, the schools have some counseling services, and we do have a program that the Health Director can speak about for the community. And we do provide $18,000 a year in funding to the Southern Norfolk ARC that does help folks with developmental disabilities. But most of those services as a provision are handled by the Commonwealth. And Segal, we do have some services at the local level through a grant program that I'd ask you to speak on.
Segal, you can pick up that.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sarah Segal-Reese, the Health Director. Yes, in the budget you'll see a $7,000 line item, and that's for the interface referral system, which we've had for 2 years now, grant funded, and the town is now going to take over funding that, with the town covering some of it and the Council on Aging covering some of it and the schools covering it. So we are able to spread across the costs of it through some grants from the COA in the Health Department budget and also in the school budget.
Thank you. Mr. Mulvihill, where are you? Veteran Services, is there anything you can answer on that? If we can, the runner can get to him. Wait a minute. Everybody at home wants to hear this too, Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you for the question. Mental health referrals are made by our department to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Both outpatient and inpatient services are available.
And is the cost then borne by the Commonwealth?
Federal government, sir.
Federal government, thank you.
Federal government.
All right. Was there a follow-up on that, sir?
Thank you for your response. I did want to fully disclose I do work for the ARC, and I'm very grateful for those funding. But as a resident, I was just concerned, given the pandemic, we're expecting budget cuts in that area for the adults that we serve, the schools, and do a great job. So I'd just like the town and the board to consider the possible budget cuts in that area, and those not only with the Council of Aging, the senior population, but also people with disabilities are hit hardest by the pandemic. So I think it's really hard to project budgets in those areas because we are expecting some cuts, and those individuals are going to need more services. I think that's something the town needs to be proactive for, just on a budget sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on this? Ms. Slater.
Jerry Slater, District 4. I just think it's very important for us to say, not to take that much time, but to really a shout out to how lucky we are to have our health department, and in particular Segal and Stacy, who are sitting here, who have taken us through amazing times, uncharted course, and have done a fantastic job. So I think and if I might, Mr. Moderator, through you, because I told Segal I was going to ask this question, as far as the budget allocation for your department, are you in good shape to continue to carry us through?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, so actually, the general manager has used CARES funding to add an additional public health nurse. So that will be funded through CARES Act funding, and then what we hope is to be absorbed into the general budget in the longer term. So the addition of a public health nurse would definitely help us navigate through these difficult times.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Thank you, Mr. Slater. Anything further on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. The motion under motion number 4, Health and Human Services, a total of $1,581,775. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Now, the 5th motion. Mrs. Haley.
Motion is found again under 3B2. Recommended by the Finance Commission that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purpose indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission, unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and the town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries totals, operating expenses totals, capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. You are voting on culture and recreation, the library, recreation, and celebrations. The total is $3,290,305.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. The motion number 5 under Article 4, motion is for $3,290,305 for culture and recreation, including the library, recreation, and celebrations. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Motion number 6, Mrs. Haley.
Motion number 6, 3B-3. Voted that $625,000 be transferred from free cash. $625,000 be transferred from the Forbes deposit account 60101924481000. I think that's an OS20D. $150,000 to be transferred from the School Department Health Insurance Grant Fund 4264, and that $46,512,522 be raised by taxation and appropriated for purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in the conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries total, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. $500,000 catch-up contributions to retirement, $428,571 contribution to stabilization fund, and $700,000 of contributions to the override stabilization fund shall not be encumbered nor expended prior to December 1st, 2020. Under this motion, you will see shared costs of facilities, debt service, state assessments of charges, county assessments, regional schools, retirement and pension contributions, workers' comp, health insurance, Medicare, capital equipment, liability insurance, reserve fund, transfers to permanent funds. $47,912,522. May I, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Ms. Haley.
Again, the last couple of lines, starting with the $500,000, I think it's line 1, 2, 3, 4, up, starting with the $500,000, are the things that we want to pause, not spend the money until after we have a good understanding of what our actual revenue will be from the state. And that will be, who knows? But we will be coming back for a special in the fall, and hopefully we will be able to vote on these things. These things are very serious, and we need them to keep our ratings good for borrowing and that sort of thing. So this wasn't a step that we took lightly. And we will be watching. We have scheduled or are scheduling meetings during the summer to make sure that we're on track, on budget, and staying afloat with what is happening within the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. All right, on this motion, any discussion? Mr. Hajar.
Thank you, David Hajar, District 4. Just a question on this one, and I know we've passed other similar ones, but if we're voting the bottom line of 47,912,252,532, and in that includes the dollars that they say cannot be expended until December, why would town meeting, the future town meeting, have to approve it?
If we spend it after December, they would.
Well, wait a minute. We're being asked to approve all of those numbers, but the items that Ms. Haley called out to us totaling $1.6 million, $28,571. I'm sorry, yeah. That $1.6 million and change is being appropriated under this motion, but the agreement is that it cannot be spent. And I understood, and Ms. Haley can correct me and others can correct me if my understanding is wrong, that we were doing that because we needed to have a little better picture. We intended to do that, to spend those amounts, but we want to be careful and hold off on spending those until we see how things develop over the next few months in terms of receipts and economy and everything else. That's my understanding, but I don't want to cut you off.
It's my understanding as well, Mr. Martyr. I'm not questioning that at all. But just a question to Ms. Haley, because she made a statement during her explanation of the last sentence, was that we would come back at a later date and authorize the expenditure of those dollars. That's not true. If we're, all this limits is we can't expend it before December 1st. If it becomes January 1st and it needs to be expended, the authorization is being given by this town meeting. Otherwise, they should reduce that amount by those dollars and then say, we'll look at it again in the fall for a town meeting to appropriate.
Tony has
Let me,
the
Ms. Haley, speak to that.
Tony has
Or
his
Mr.
hand
Mizuko. Playing ping pong here with who's going to answer. Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is the Finance Commission's plan to be able to be prepared to reduce revenues in the fall if necessary. The Finance Commission worked on a plan to be prepared to reduce revenues by $2.7 million if necessary in the event we see substantial cuts to state aid and other local receipts. If that does not materialize, we would go ahead with these expenditures as we normally did. The date of December 1st was picked because we assumed that we would be well past our fall town meetings where we would actually have to get through a town meeting and settle our tax sheet. So if our revenues end up being fine, if state aid is good, if the federal government gives us money from something, then we would make these appropriations just like we otherwise would. The Finance Commission is holding off on that portion being expended. That way we're not putting money into a stabilization account and then taking it out. So all you're saying is this is the total appropriation. We're raising and appropriating this. If we've made no changes between now and December, they will go into those accounts like they otherwise would.
And if things go bad, then at a fall town meeting, we could modify these appropriations that we're being asked to vote on.
We would
now.
we would replace $2.7 million worth of revenue with the items identified here. We're identifying them ahead of time so that way we're not sitting in the fall trying to find $2.7 million and saying, uh-oh, we've already contributed an extra $500,000 to the pension fund that we can't get back. So we're just saying pause these, wait until the fall, and then we'll see what we need to do. It's likely that we won't see a full $2.7 million revenue loss. It could be less than that. So rather than try to peg it exactly, we set aside that money, and in the fall, whatever adjustments we have to make, we've held off on these expenditures so that town meeting can make those adjustments, and we don't have to come back. If everything is good, everything is good.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hajar, did that answer the question for you? Before I go on?
Not really. No.
Okay. Wait a minute. Let's get you the microphone. For Mr. Hajar?
I don't want to belabor this. I understand what Mr. Mizuko and what Ms. Haley are stating. I'm trying to understand the legalities of it. We're asking town meeting members to appropriate the full $47,992,000, which includes monies that can't be spent prior to December 1st. I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure that we're not then coming back and asking town meeting members in the fall to reauthorize those same dollars.
No.
So if it's after December 1st and those dollars get spent, they're legally okay to do so.
But it
if town meeting wants to rescind that, then that would be a different case.
If we're being asked to appropriate this money now, but as a precautionary matter, the vote includes a condition that certain sums cannot be spent until December 1, because if things go badly for us over the next few months and we get to a fall town meeting and the FinCom tells us that we don't have as much money as we thought we would have, then it's up to town meeting could vote not to spend that money that is being held in abeyance. But if we didn't put the condition on, conceivably, we could spend that money now and then find ourselves in a more difficult position come the fall. That's my understanding of what they're intending. So we're authorizing it now, and if things go along as we hope they will, we don't have to take another vote on it.
That's right.
And if things go badly, then the Finance Commission will probably come back to us and ask us to rescind or modify portions of the vote taken tonight. Is that correct? Correct. And Ms. Haley says that's correct. Mr. Mizuko is nodding. All right, so we're in agreement on that?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this? Seeing none, then we'll put this to a vote. Under motion 6, the total is for $47,912,522, subject to the condition just discussed, about 1.6 million under this motion is going to be held until after December 1, and otherwise this is paying general fund, facilities, debt service, state assessments, county assessments, regional schools, retirement and pension contributions, workers' comp, health insurance, Medicare, capital equipment, liability insurance, reserve fund, and transfers to permanent funds. That's what it involves. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. The 7th motion, Mrs. Haley.
Motion 7, recommended by the Finance Commission, that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted on for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. Here's another one of those items, $300,000 of funding related to the School Opportunity Act appropriation shall not be encumbered nor expended prior to December 1, 2020. Total is for education total $52,736,691.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. All right, this is our education budget. And I think you were all notified that the school department's presentation was available online and also on television, as was the Finance Commission's. We'll go into discussion now on this. Any discussion on this? Nobody seeking to be recognized. This may be a first. All right, the motion then, number 7, is for $52,736,691 for education. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. All right, motion number 8, Mrs. Haley.
Motion number 8, 3B-3 is pages. That the following voted that the following sums be raised by rates and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses, capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. You are voting on the Light Department, Norwood Light Department, and under, I guess it's under Public Works now, $46,719,801.
All right, and this is paid not by taxation, but by rates charged by the Light Department. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Seeing none then, we'll put it to a vote. Motion number 8 is for a total of $46,719,801 to be raised by rates for the Light Department. On that, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Motion number 9, Mrs. Haley.
Motion number 9, recommended by the Finance Commission, voted that the following sums be raised by rates and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission, unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salaries, totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. This is for broadband, $7,389,605.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Any discussion on this? Seeing none then, we'll put it to a vote. Motion number 9 for broadband. The sums are to be raised by rates, and the total is $7,389,605. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Motion number 10, Mrs. Haley.
Motion number 10, recommended by the Finance Commission, voted that the sum of $670,000 be transferred from AMR Receipts Fund 4256, and that $13,804,256 be raised by rates and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in the conformance of the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in Section 3C of the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses totals, capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. This vote is for water sewer fund, public works sewerage, drain maintenance, water distribution, MWRA assessments, coming to the total of $14,474,256.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Any discussion on this? Seeing none then, we'll put it to a vote. On the motion, number 10, under Article 4, for Water and Sewer Fund, total is for $14,474,256. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. All right, we now move on from the budget and on to Article 5. Mrs. Haley, is this coming from you?
Yes.
Okay.
May I speak for 1 second before we start this?
No,
Okay,
you're going to make the motion.
Okay, make the motion.
Then you can speak.
Okay. Recommended by the Finance Commission, indefinite postponement.
All right. Your motion for indefinite postponement. You want to speak to it?
No, I just had wanted to make a comment before I did this. Never mind.
Not on the, okay.
Okay. Not on the motion.
Can you tell us, we're not moving any money from free cash to offset the amount appropriated from taxation, is that right?
For the assessors.
Not at this point.
For the assessors,
Okay.
no.
And, wait a
We
minute,
got an
Mr.
issue.
Plasko?
That's for the assessors.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
I believe this motion to indefinite postponement is inappropriate. We need to vote on this matter. Just checked with council, and it is advisable that we take the vote on this matter. It's a matter we take every year at the annual, and it's appropriate that we do so this year.
Well, the article says to see what sum the town will vote to authorize the Board of Assessors to apply from free cash in the Treasury and offset to the amount appropriated to be raised by taxation. So it's calling for a particular sum, isn't it? And no sum has been presented. So if you want to propose an amendment, Mr. McQuaid might want to weigh in on this. Mr. McQuaid, can you help us on this? Okay. All right.
Mr. Moderator, this article is here if we need to balance the budget with free cash. Earlier, in an earlier motion, we used $625,000 against a specific thing. So this motion is required if you're going to, in general, supplement the budget by the use of free cash to balance a budget. So that's only the prerogative of the Board of Assessors. In this case, we don't need to do that. Therefore, I believe the indefinite postponement is appropriate.
Moderator?
Mr. Plasko?
I withdraw my comments. I was forgetting that we weren't using stabilization at this town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the motion as it stands right now is for indefinite postponement under Article 5. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On the motion for indefinite postponement, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Article 6, Mrs. Haley.
Article 6.
Your recommendation under Article
Yeah,
6
okay.
is indefinite postponement, is that right?
That's correct.
Is there anything you want to say about it?
Nope.
Nope? Okay.
Nope, not a thing.
Mr. Plasko? I'm sorry. Wait a minute, Mr. Maloney will also want to speak, but do you want to, are you deferring to Mr. Maloney?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Maloney, District 4, and Chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee. We did meet twice this year. We did put together what we think is a robust plan of capital improvements looking out over the next 5 or 6 years. As you saw from the special, however, we decided to endorse a very limited menu at this time. Because of the current crisis, we do expect to come back with a full capital outlay report for you and for your consideration in the fall, should we have a special town meeting. A lot of really good stuff on there, including a lot of work up here at the high school and the grounds around here. But anyway, so we do intend to give a report in the fall if we meet, Mr. Chairman, but for the time being, we think indefinite postponement is appropriate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything further? All right, the motion under Article 6 is for indefinite postponement. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. Article 7, Mrs. Haley.
Recommended by the Finance Commission, voted based upon recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee. The Finance Commission moves that the following sums be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund revenues and reserved for the purposes indicated. CPF reserved for open space and recreational use of land, $78,640. CPF reserved for preservation of historic resources, $78,640. CPF reserved for community housing, $78,640. CPF reserved for admin and operating expenses, $39,320. CPF undesignated fund balances, $511,157, for a total of $786,397.
All right. Are we spending any of this money at this point, or we're simply designating money that's in the Community Preservation Fund and designating it or assigning it to particular pigeonholes within that committee's work? And Mr. McFarland, who's on that committee, is nodding his head at me, and we actually had a conversation on this over the weekend when I was taking a break from trimming bushes next door. All right, so we're not being asked to really spend this, but we're assigning it to these particular accounts. And a subsequent use of this money later on, if we were to spend it on historic resources or community housing or anything like that, would require approval by town meeting. Is that correct? Okay, we all agree on that. All right, so this is just designating where the money is going to be parked for the time being. Any discussion on the matter? All right, seeing none then, we'll put it to a vote on the motion by the Finance Commission. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. We move on to Article 8. Mrs. Haley.
Recommended by the Finance Commission. Based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, the Finance Commission moves that the following sum be transferred from CPF reserve for administrative expenses and appropriated for the following purpose. FY21 CPF administrative and operating expenses, $39,320.
So about a minute and a half ago, we designated where some money would be parked, and apparently some of it is now being moved out of its parking spot to be used for administrative and operating expenses. Is that correct? $39,320. All right, so this is where we make an appropriation of some of that money that we just, on the previous article and motion, had put in a particular cubbyhole or pigeonhole. Okay, so now we're being asked to spend it on administrative and operating expenses. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, then we'll put it to a vote. On that motion for $39,320,000, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. All right. Mrs. Haley, have you run out of motions? Well, just a minute, please, before you, if you're going to make a motion, I just have two quick announcements. Mr. Maloney made reference to the Capital Outlay Committee a moment ago. There's at least one opening that I'm aware of. There may be more on the Capital Outlay Committee that are appointed by the moderator. Anyone who is interested in being involved in the Capital Outlay Committee as an appointee of the moderator, please let me know, ideally by email addressed to me at moderator@norwoodma.gov. Secondly, this is a year in which we appoint a Rules Committee. You will recall that we changed our rules of procedure last fall, and decided that the Rules Committee would be appointed at least every 5 years, more often if necessary. And so I will be appointing a Rules Committee at some point soon, now that we're about to conclude the annual town meeting. So anyone who is interested in being appointed to the Rules Committee, we appoint one person from each of the 9 districts. So if you're interested, send me an email, indicate your district that you represent, and also it helps to give me some background as to why you're interested in serving in the Rules Committee, why you would be perhaps competent on that and helpful on that, and welcome all kinds of help on these different groups. Now, I think Mr. Plasko is about to make a motion to dissolve. Is that right, Mr. Plasko? All right, so he's going to make that motion, and I expect it'll be a quick vote. But please, reminding folks that we're going to ask you to wait so we don't have a mad rush to the exits. If everybody would wait, and the ushers, if they could take positions, please, to help direct people out of the room. Those in the front of the back section will be asked to go out door 6. Those in the back end of the back section will go out door number 7. And those who are here in the front section will be asked to go out door number 5. Mr. Plasko, the motion? Mr. Plasko has moved that the annual town meeting be dissolved. Mr. Conley seconds that. Any discussion? No, none allowed. On the motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Now, we have the room till 11 o'clock, folks. But if you want to go home, I guess that's recommended. Thank you all very much for showing up and for participating.